Last Sunday in Beijing, a robot finished a half marathon in 50 minutes and 26 seconds. That is faster than the official world record, faster than every human alive. And the robot wasn't chasing a runner. It was navigating the course on its own, with no one driving it. 1 year ago, on the same course, the fastest robot took more than 2 hours and 40 minutes, more than 3 times slower. So something changed in 12 months, and it wasn't the legs. The winner was a humanoid called Lightning, built by Honor. Not a robotics company, a phone company. It stands about 5.5 feet tall, has 2 arms that barely swing, and navigates using LiDAR, cameras, and satellite positioning. It ran the course autonomously, following the route, watching for obstacles, and balancing itself for every one of the roughly 50,000 steps it took. More than 100 teams entered this year. About 60% of the robots on the track were remote controlled by a human with a joystick. Lightning was in the 40% that ran on their own. Autonomous here is a specific word. It means the robot was getting no live instructions from a human. No steering. No radio link telling it when to speed up or slow down. The only information coming in was from its own onboard sensors. And the hardware, honestly, wasn't the breakthrough. Most of these robots use parts you can buy off a shelf in Shenzhen. What changed is how they learn. Here is something that sounds obvious but isn't. Walking on 2 legs is one of the hardest problems in robotics. Every step is a controlled fall. Your body tips forward, your foot catches you, your weight shifts, and you tip again. You do it hundreds of times a minute without thinking. A robot has to think about all of it. Classical control theory works beautifully for a robot arm bolted to the floor. It falls apart the moment the whole machine has to stay upright on 2 feet on uneven ground at speed while reacting to things it has never seen. For decades, engineers tried to write the balance rules by hand. It kind of worked at walking speed. It completely broke at running speed. So the field did what it usually does when a problem is too complicated to write down. It stopped writing rules and let the robot learn them. Here is how it learns. It doesn't learn on a real track or inside a warehouse. It learns inside a physics simulator, running on a graphics chip. Picture thousands of identical copies of the same robot, all running at once in a virtual world. Each one tries a slightly different sequence of motor movements. Each one falls over, gets reset, tries again. The simulation runs thousands of times faster than real life. An afternoon of wall clock time becomes years of robot experience. You could not do this on a real robot. Its knees would explode. Every robot in the sim gets a score as it moves. Go forward, score goes up. Stay upright, score goes up. Fall down, score crashes. Waste energy, score drops a little. A small neural network sits inside each robot. It looks at the sensor readings, the joint angles, the orientation, the feet, and it decides what voltage to send to each of the roughly 40 motors. After every run, a learning algorithm nudges the network a little, slightly more toward the motor patterns that scored higher, slightly less toward the ones that scored lower. It is not deep, it is not clever, it is just very patient. In the early hours of training, the robots flail. They fall sideways. They take 1 step and collapse. After enough attempts, something interesting happens. Without anyone telling them to, they discover a heel-to-toe gait. They learn to swing their arms for balance. They lean forward into turns. These are the same tricks human runners use, and nobody programmed any of them in. Run that loop long enough, with millions of attempts, and the robots that learn to move forward and stay upright start to dominate. Nobody ever taught them a walking gait. They found one that worked. But there is a catch. A policy that looks flawless in a clean simulation usually falls over the second it touches real concrete. The sim is smooth. The world isn't. So during training, the simulator lies on purpose. The floor gets slippery, then sticky. The robot's weight shifts as if it is carrying a backpack. A virtual wind shoves it sideways. The motors get a little weaker than the real ones. A robot that only has to survive 1 world learns shortcuts. A robot that has to survive 1,000,000 broken worlds learns something closer to actually balancing. That is the trick that lets a policy trained entirely in a virtual world walk out onto real pavement and just work. It is called Sim to Real, and it is why 2026 looks nothing like 2025. There's a second half to this story, and it is less glamorous. Hardware finally got cheap. A research humanoid in 2015 cost more than a house. Unitree now sells a working bipedal robot for about $16,000. A car, not a building. and it is not one company. Chinese firms like Unitree, Agabot, Leju, UB Tech, and Fourier are all shipping humanoids at scale. Agabot alone has already put out 10,000 units. There's also a feedback effect that researchers call the data flywheel. Every shipped robot is, in principle, a data source. Every fall, every recovered step, every successful task becomes a new example to learn from. The more units in the wild, the faster the next generation improves. Cheap bodies means more teams can train. More teams means more data. More data closes the learning loop faster. The marathon is, in some sense, the first visible result. Before anyone puts a robot on the Olympic podium, read the footnotes. There are several. The course was flat, paved, and closed to traffic. No curbs to catch a tow. No crowd to dodge. Lightning doesn't get tired. Motors don't cramp. Batteries don't dehydrate. A human at minute 58 is fighting a body. A robot at minute 58 is fighting a math problem. One of the other honor robots actually finished faster than lightning, in 48 minutes and 19 seconds, but it was remote controlled by a human with a joystick, so it didn't count for the autonomous prize. And the comparison to Jacob Kiplimo's world record of 57 minutes and 20 seconds is technically true. It is also, as someone pointed out online, a bit like saying your car can outrun a cheetah. The comparison proves less than it sounds like. The real story isn't the marathon. Running fast in a straight line is the easy task. The hard work is what the same training loop unlocks next. Change the reward function, not the robot. Sort this box instead of staying upright. Fold this towel. Open this door. Contact-rich manipulation, the kind of work that involves touching the world carefully, is much harder than walking. But the approach is the same. Millions of attempts in simulation, with enough randomness that the policy survives the real world. NVIDIA has released an open robot model called Isaac Groot that already lets a humanoid take plain language instructions and turn them into actions. Pick up the red cup, put it on the shelf, fold the blue shirt. The robot plans, moves, checks itself, and tries again if it misses. That is where the real race is. Once that loop closes for manipulation the way it has for locomotion, humanoids stop being demos and start being workers. Lightning didn't have a coach or a training plan or a rest day. It didn't run a single step on a real track until race morning. It learned to run in a world that doesn't exist. And now, one simulated lifetime at a time, it is learning to work in ours.